Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about independent and dependent variables. We've talked a little bit about this before, not much, but we're going to rehash it and go back through, make sure that we have a clear understanding of what they are and be able to identify them as we go through. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, talk about the definition. All right, independent, and this is really independent variable, dependent variable is what this is. All right, so independent, a variable whose variation does not depend on that of another. Okay, so independent, I mean, just like the word says, it does not depend on anything else. Okay, oftentimes it's denoted as X. In math, it's the X. Okay, dependent variable, a variable whose variables whose value depends on that of another. So this one depends on another, and it's often denoted as Y. So when you see it, when you see like tables and graphs, your X, well, that's your independent. Your Y is your dependent. And we're going to get into it and kind of look at it. We're going to look at some word problems, and then we're going to get into some tables, graphs, equations, and we're going to identify this is the one that changes this one. And that's what we're looking for, okay? All right, so here we go. Identify the dependent variable in the following statement. So dependent, we're looking for the one that is affected by the other. It's dependent on the other, okay? So identify the dependent variable, okay, again, a variable whose value depends on that of another. And here's our setup. The more time people spend with a family pet, the less stress they feel. All right, so what are our variables just to begin with? Well, the more time people spend with a family pet, time spent with a family pet, that's one, the less stress they feel. So the amount of stress. So those are our two variables. Okay, now we got to decide which one changes the other. Well, the amount of time you spend with a family pet changes the amount of stress that you feel. So this is your independent and this is your dependent. Now which one did they ask us for? Dependent, so we know the amount of stress is our dependent variable. And guys, that's really what we're looking for. We're trying to read this and say, okay, this is my independent, this is my dependent. And that's what we're looking for. But we got to know the definitions and be able to apply them by the words that they give us. Yeah, there we go. All right. Justin decides to make cookies for his family. Based on how many he wants to make, he needs 4 cups of flour. Which item represents the independent variable? Okay, which one stands by itself? Which one's independent? Which one changes the other? That's what we're looking for. All right, so he decides to make cookies for his family. Based on how many he wants to make, he needs 4 cups of flour. All right, so the number of batches of cookies he makes changes how many cups of flour he needs. And as you just got to read this and interpret it. So this tells you how many cups of flour, but how would you know how many cups of flour you have? Well, it depends on how many batches of cookie you make. So batches of cookie are your independent, cups of flour are your dependent. Okay, so that's what you're looking for here. All right. And we're just going to do probably 1 or 2 more of these, and then we're going to move into tables, graphs, and equations. Identify the dependent variable in the following statement. The more people that attend a concert, the more expensive the tickets are. Okay, so which one is our independent? Which one is our dependent? Which one changes the other? That's what we're looking for. Okay, so identify the dependent. Dependent is the one that gets changed. The more people that attend a concert, the more expensive the tickets are. So the relation is that the more people you have, the more expensive it is. So the number of people that attend changes the price of the tickets. All right, so and we're looking for the dependent, so we're looking for here the cost of the tickets. All right, now the number of people changes the cost of the tickets. These other 2 things, they don't even matter. They're not in there. This changes this. That's what we're looking for. All right? All right. Pace is going roller skating. For every mile she roller skates, she burns 130 calories. All right, this changes that. All right, for every mile she roller skates, she burns 130 calories. So as she roller skates, she burns calories. The number of miles, the independent, changes the calories burned, the dependent. All right, so which item represents the dependent variable? Calories. The more miles you go, the more calories you burn. All right, so that's really all that is. Okay, now let's start looking at tables. So I'm going to switch this real quick, get into tables. Here we go. All right, so remember, this is really simple, okay? Do not overcomplicate this, all right? Because in our definition, I told you which one of those is your dependent and independent, or your independent and your dependent. Now look at the definition. Independent, a variable whose variation does not depend on that of another, often denoted as X. Well, on a table here, this first line is always your X. This line is always your Y. Now here, they use B and they use D here. So what? This first one, that's your X. This one is your Y. So you know that this is your independent and this is your dependent. Okay? This little part right here should not be hard. Okay? This is always your independent. This is always your dependent. Okay? It's super important that you get that straight in your head. It's going to come into play later on. Okay? Which variable is the dependent variable? Well, if this is always my independent and this is always my dependent, dollars. D. Oh, do they want my, which variable is the independent variable? And then they come down here and so they're asking us to identify, did I choose the same one? I did, I chose the same one. Watch that, they switch them on you. Be careful. Okay? So, that's what they did there. All right, so here, rabbits, independent, dollars, dependent. Which variable is the independent variable? Rabbits are. Which variable is the dependent? And look at it, they did it again. They switched it on you. Be careful, watch that. All right, so dollars, dependent. All right, guys, that's all there is to this. You just need to be able to identify, this is the independent, this is the dependent. That's what today is about. Identifying your independent, identifying your dependent. Okay, so I'm not going to go through a lot of that because, well, it's straightforward. All right, so let's change this over and let's look at our graphs. All right, this is pretty much the same thing though. Look, the graph shows a proportional relationship between the numbers of mules sold X and the total cost Y. Now, if you can read a graph, this isn't going to be too bad. Okay, and here, let me do this. Make it where you can see it. How's that? That better? Okay. All right, so here we have our graph. Now, we have our whole graph. Now remember, the X's go horizontally. Okay, so this right here are your X's. This is your Y. Y's go vertically. If you understand that, this becomes way easier. Look, which label on the graph represents the dependent variable? Well, if your Y's are the dependent and your X's are the independent, here, total cost in dollars. That is your dependent variable. That's really all there is to it. And then in this one, they're going to kick you back and forth between graphs and tables. So you should learn that. So what is the independent variable? Number of hours worked. And going back. But here's what I want to focus in on here. Okay, again, here is your dependent. Here's your dependent. Ooh. Here is your independent. Here are your X's. Here are your Y's. Very important that we get that straight. All right, so which label on the graph represents the independent variable? Independent. Bracelets, your X, okay? I mean, really, that's all there is to that one. Just being able to identify it. Like I said, all I want you to be able to do right now is identify independent, dependent. So now we still have equations we're going to do. We're going to take a look at those. All right. Now this you got to remember what we've done before. Now before we did y equals kx, our proportion, how to write a proportion, right? Y equals kx. And you're going to start seeing this also like this going forward. So you're going to see these two things written like that. Now remember, your x is your independent, your y is your dependent. This one changes this one. Well, if this is what you're looking at, when you look at this equation, you know exactly which one is your independent, which one is your dependent. And when you read the equation, it's going to make sense. Look, the equation below shows the number of nails in needed to make birdhouses B. Which variable is the dependent variable? Now look at this. As I change this one, this will change. Okay, so here, B, I'm going to plug in a number 1, so I get 23 out. But if I plug in 2, I get 46 out, and that's changed. Okay, so as I change this, this changes. So right here is my independent, here is my dependent. Okay, this really isn't hard, but you got to know what you're looking at. All right, so which variable is the dependent variable? Well, n. Well, what does n represent? The number of nails. The number of nails. That's what you're looking for. Okay? And then again, the equation below shows the cost of purchasing books. B for $5, D each. Okay? Which variable is the independent variable? Well, D equals 5B. The number of books I purchase changes the amount that I pay. Well, that makes sense. So B is my independent, D is my dependent. Okay? And then they just throw in a couple others just to mess with you. Guys, today's lesson, not extremely hard. This helps understanding what you're looking at. Y equals mx, y equals kx, those two things, the same thing. They're the same thing. Okay? If you understand this, you're going to be fine there. If you understand that independent is your x, dependent is your y, you're going to be good here. Okay? If you understand those things, you're going to be good. If you run into any problems, any help, let me know. I'm here for you.